here today from our different panelists in terms of how do we harness the power of our water resources and how can we leverage further financing based on that. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists here today. So first and foremost, Dr. Nick Hepworth, Executive Director, Water Witness International, who will be running us through a fairly new and impactful initiative known as the Fair Water Footprint. I'm sure that you must have seen it, and it was a big splashy launch last year, but this is really the start towards trying to actually account for the utilization of and the extraction of our water resources. Next, we'll be hearing from Frederick Kihara, Africa Water Fund's Director, the Nature Conservancy, who was lucky enough because he already had a prelude yesterday, a nice pitch that was done. So Frederick is going to get into further details in terms of, yes, payment for ecosystems. We are well aware that that is something that is still emerging on the continent. After all, how many countries have water resource authorities or a strict structure on extraction? Next, we will hear from Leonard Akwani from Conservation International. And I know your motto is protect nature, isn't it? Conservation, oceans. So it'll be good to see in terms of what are the tools and instruments that you use in terms of achieving that. And then we will finally hear from Anthelem Iragena, Principal Water Officer, Ministry of Water and Environment, Directorate of Water Resources Management, Uganda, Freshwater Challenge, just to hear in terms from a country perspective, really what have been your successes, your would-be failures, and how well we're doing. Now, I have challenged our panelists here today to imagine if they were sitting in a room full of heads of states. What is it, the key messages that they would want to be conveyed? What are the strong policy recommendations, the challenges, what further needs improvement? We probably all know the answer to that, but it would be good to hear from them. So, I won't take more of your time. Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Serene, and good morning, everybody. A real pleasure to be here with you these 2 days. As Serene said, I'm going to talk through the value of water that Africa provides to the rest of the world and think about how we can better harness that to help deliver SDG 6 and a water resilient future. Now, I'm sure that you're all familiar with the concept of a water footprint. The idea that everything we eat, wear, consume requires water to produce, and that water can be estimated and traced to the factories, farms, and mines where those raw materials are produced. So, for example, this shirt took 3,000 litres of water to produce. The orange juice you had with your breakfast, about 2,000 litres of water to produce that. And a mobile phone, about 12,000 litres of water to produce. Now, at UN Water in February, we produced some new analysis on the global water footprint, and the findings were explosive. We revealed the profound dependency of high-income economies in the global north on water use in the global south. So, for example, typically, rich countries have an external water footprint of between 50 and 80%. So of all the water they need to meet their consumption needs, most of it is beyond their borders. For the UK, it's 70%. For the Netherlands, 94%. And to put that into perspective, that means that a typical UK household is using 77 bathtubs of other people's water every day. In the Netherlands, 270 bathtubs every single day. Now, when we map those water footprints, hopefully this will work. Yeah, when we map those water footprints and where they come from, you can see that a significant amount of that water use takes place in Africa, probably about a quarter to a third of all that water use. Another way of thinking about this is to consider the water dependency of Africa's exports. This map shows that 92% of the continent's exports, worth about $432 billion a year, are critically dependent on water. It draws on Comtrade data and the CDP's new water impact indices to show that the key sectors for Africa's export economy are highly based on high water withdrawals and highly polluting industries. And that's no surprise given the dependence on agricultural commodities and extractives and minerals. Now, these large water footprints and this dependence on water isn't a problem in itself. Water's not like carbon, and where it's used responsibly, it's a really important driver of wealth, job creation, trade, and development. The problem is that it's not always used responsibly. And our analysis, and the link through, if you scan that code, you'll find the research. The analysis suggests that 50% of the global North's water footprint is unsustainable, draining and polluting rivers and aquifers and lakes, and pushing people, communities, ecosystems, and economies into extreme climate vulnerability. Now, our research on the ground confirms this, and we've got some tragic examples of how, for example, the sugar sector is exacerbating droughts and floods in Tanzania, in Malawi, and in Zambia, how pollution from textiles and mining is causing serious problems in Madagascar, Lesotho, Zambia as well, and how production of fresh fruit, vegetables and flowers is driving water crisis and denial of the human right to water in Kenya, Ethiopia and Morocco. And that research will be published early next year. As we overshoot the goal of 1.5 degrees of global heating, those impacts are going to get much more severe. Impacts on human health, ecosystems, impacts on the economy. We're already seeing investors and businesses running away from water risk in Africa, even where they've had a hand in driving those risks in the first place. And that's why the World Bank predict that by 2050, unless we take action, GDPs are going to lose about 6%, as much as 12%, because of water-related losses. So Africa's getting a raw deal. Based around this trade, it's getting jobs and export revenue, but in return for trashing the environment, being pushed into water stress, and draining away the lifeblood of fresh water. So what can we do? How can we make sure that our water footprints are fair, and how can we harness this value of water that Africa provides so that it's a driver of transformative change rather than harm? First and foremost, we need to close the financing gap for water infrastructure and water regulation, which exposes all those sectors to risk. Based on analysis, water resource regulators based in offices receive 10% of the funding they need to do a proper job, to regulate and control pollution, and to regulate and administer water abstraction within the limits of sustainability. So for every $10 they need to do that work, they're getting $1. So of course, water risks are there in Africa's export economies. And that's a problem for everybody. So you need to close that governance and financing gap. But where will the money come from? This is my key message. There are two simple answers to that. The first is fees and charges and tariffs. Africa is charging far too little for the water that the world uses in its economy. To all intents and purposes, bulk water use is free once you've paid a nominal charge for a water abstraction license or a wastewater license. We did some quick analysis on Kenya. 1 megalitre of water in Kenya costs 5 Kenyan cents. That means that an Olympic swimming pool of water use just costs $1. Now for multinationals, that's not going to register, that's free. And this is really important. This is the key message from this session from me. Let's get that sorted out. So let's start charging an adequate amount for water use and for wastewater discharges. We were with the global finance community last week in Edinburgh, and they said, look, water's just too cheap to register as a concern. We're never going to pay attention to water unless it's charged properly. The second area is taxes. The multinationals that benefit from that water footprint in Africa are really good at the lawful but awful practice of offshoring profits, base erosion and profit shifting. So they pay minimal tax in their countries of operation. The OECD estimate that governments lose between 100 billion and 240 billion a year as a result of BEPS, Now, of course, if you claw that back, it's not all going to pay for water, but it's certainly going to help. Now, many countries have signed up to the OECD's inclusive framework for action on BEPS in Africa, but many haven't. And is that something that we can change? Now, what we need is transformative action on this. And the transformative action we need is being driven by the signatories to something called the Fair Water Footprints Declaration. As Serene mentioned, this was launched at COP26 in Glasgow, and it commits its signatories to a fair water footprint by 2030. Now, they recognise that we don't necessarily need to reduce our water footprints, we need to make them sustainable, equitable, and resilient. So they've all committed to making sure that water use in their supply chains by 2030 shows zero pollution, sustainable and equitable withdrawal of water, universal access to wash for workers and communities in their sphere of influence, promotion and protection of nature, and effective planning for droughts and floods. Now, of course, that's hugely ambitious, but the signatures we've got, including the UK, Peru, Malawi, Madagascar, Austria, and Finland, together with some of the banks, investment houses, corporations including Unilever and Sainsbury's, these are the pioneers in the vanguard to work this out. How do we get hyper-transparency, responsible water use in our supply chains? The kinds of things they're looking at, working with the finance community to improve due diligence, safeguards, and impact investment for water security. Those mechanisms are failing at the moment. Too many investments are going ahead, driving water risk through pollution and over-abstraction, and a lack of access to wash for communities. Looking at trade agreements. Trade agreements already specify responsible water use, but they're not implemented. So we're looking at how we can address that. Working with civil society, really useful to expose these issues and drive action from consumers and through the supply chains. Looking at voluntary standards for water stewardship and cross-government action to lock in water stewardship. So that you need to do water stewardship as a precursor to doing business. Lots of excitement, a really sense of excitement around this. I've got the honor of being the co-chair of the technical advisory group for this work, and it's moving forward rapidly. We're looking forward to new signatories, 2 new African states coming on board at COP28, really exciting, and an investment of $50 million from the UK government to make this a reality. So join us. Let's make that change happen.
Thank you very much, Nick. Nick's parting shot. Join us, yes. Needless to say that I noticed a lot of reactions in the room, so I'm not going to ask you any questions, Nick. I think I'm just going to leave it to the audience, but thank you for confirming what we have all been suspecting, that our water is being given out for free. Frederick, after Nick's tragic examples, but with some solutions that he has provided, over to you in terms of how do we leverage or how do we better manage our water resources?
Thank you, Sarine. And from your analogy in the beginning, I want to start by Your Excellencies. And then I'll quickly brief. I'm Fred Kihara. I work for the Nature Conservancy. And the Nature Conservancy is a global conservation organization, just in case you haven't come across us. We're about 70 years old. We are in over 80 countries. 9 of them are here in Africa, and we're growing the footprint. Our mission is to protect land and water on which our life depends. And in most of the places, we work with partners. Like we're working with many partners in Africa to make sure that we can deliver solutions, particularly on matters water. So thank you very much. In terms of your question, I want to dwell quickly on 3 items. One item is that we approach this from a payment. We're leveraging PES, Payment for Ecosystem Services. And we are adapting this to payment for watershed services. What can we do to mobilize everybody to take action to take care of our water sources? We do believe, and I know many people know that water actually comes from nature, but I don't think it's everybody gets out there or gets an opportunity to go out there to take some action. So to address challenges that many urban centers have seen and received, largely from water shortages. We crafted this modality that brings both private sector and public sector to work together. I think we have heard about PPP, and this is a modified PPP model where we get the public sector within an urban center to work with the private sector. Jointly, they mobilize their own financial resources enough to pay for the costs of taking care of their water source as a way of sustaining their water security. And with that, we engage with the community. The upstream, we call the model water fund, or watershed investment program. But the idea is to get actual activities going on in the watershed at scale that needs to be done. Out of that, we've seen most of these models become bankable. Bankable in the sense that we can develop a business case, which is my second point. That we look at the cost and what needs to be done, and we look at the returns. And we work at the scene, then where does the money come from? And we've seen many cities around the world can actually pay for the cost of investing in their watersheds just by the savings they will make by having to spend less treating the water that they give and distribute to their residents. And that makes a strong case. Why would we not do more? Private sector has already taken their own loans and invested in cities. They have their factories, they have their manufacturing, they have employees. Why would they not go an extra mile to safeguard their water source if indeed they are dependent on this? Why does this matter for Africa? Is because, and to the world, 25% of all global biodiversity is in Africa. We are sinking carbon stocks in Africa. We're taking care. Our direct impact on climate mitigation is great. Why would we then not attract funding from the frameworks like the biodiversity framework that we have now, like UNFCCC on climate? And why would we not continue agitating that finances be provided for climate adaptation? Africa needs this, and this is part of the reason why we use these business skills for that. Quickly on my third item is where are we? Well, we started with launching the first water fund in Nairobi in 2015. And it was clear that by savings, we could save $2 for every dollar we put out there. It is today very clear that by engaging the communities for their own livelihood, we're multiplying the $1 to like $7 or $8. Communities are willing to adopt agroforestry when they work on their farms. They are growing grass on their terraces to make sure that the erosion is removed. 1 million avocado and macadamia trees that have been planted by farmers in the watersheds today is earning the communities over $60 million in revenue every year. It only costs $1 million to get the seedlings out there. But the systems are highly rewarding. Would that not be a quantifiable benefit that we can talk about? The grass is cut, is fed to livestock, and the improvement in the livestock value chain is $12 million. If you look at the mash you invest and the mash that comes out of it, it's very clear. We now started a movement, just to move this quickly, where we have about 900 of us professionals allowed Africa who are looking at how the issues of nature-based solutions. We're working with DFIs. We're talking with your task team leaders for water to see how can they include nature-based solutions to be part of the solutions we're looking for when we invest in dams, in treatment plants for water, in pipelines. Because a healthy watershed means that the rivers are healthier and they can flow longer, even when it is not raining. It makes business sense. It improves water supply throughout the whole system. Your pipes can earn a little bit more and pay for themselves faster. So this is basically what we're doing. Just to mention quickly, because we currently governors of the World Water Council, is that at the 9th World Water Forum in Dakar, Africa made a decision to launch the Source Water Protection Partnership for Africa. We moved that ahead, but our main objective is to triple the investment that goes to source water protection by the year 2030. We need you. We need banks, we need practitioners, we need governments to make this a reality. As I close, I want to ask you, would you not rather join us? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. Another call. Join us. Leonard, there's a lot of pressure on the both of you. Fred, before I get to our other panelists, and maybe just to bounce off what Nick has just presented, in the spirit of collaboration, joint effort, and not working in silos, where do you see the synergies, for example, with a program such as Fair Water Footprints? Where is it that we can join hands? And Nick, I would ask you the same thing in terms of how do we band up, in a more constructive way? Fred, over to you.
Thank you, Anne. And Nick had a great presentation. I should have recognized that at the beginning. I think Nick gave us very accurate data that we need to apply. We need to tell people the truth. The fact that we have capital fright, now we have water fright in the particular horticultural value chain and flowers is concerning. And also fruits that I mentioned, because most of these are also sent to the international market. On a really good side is that we're providing food security for our people. On another good side is that we're helping communities earn some money. It's a cash economy. They need to take their children to school. They're earning some money. But the bad side is we're not doing full cost accounting to see why would somebody not pay if they're getting so much for water. And I think we'll take that way beyond here. But one of the things we're trying to do is to tell the private sector that conserving water is everyone's business. And I think we had this from Louis Fouchon. It takes the whole world to save water. Yep. So I think that debate about investment, and I'm very happy, I could name names of real private sector companies, particularly in beverage, that have come in with their own money. We have a water fair today in Freetown, Sierra Leone, because one beverage company donated their own money to help us create a solution or craft a solution for that. And we're doing the same in Nigeria for Lagos, looking at the watersheds in Osun and Ogun, and again, that's paid by a private sector company. So I think they're seeing the goal. We need to be a bit more coordinated to get this happening. Yep. But I actually also want to recognize the fact that we have in the country governments and local NGOs like us that are also getting more conscious. The most beautiful is watch water and sanitation health-based NGOs are now beginning to think about where does our water come from. And they are appreciating IWRM, which is water resource management. And we want to work with them and encourage this everywhere we go. We are in Ivory Coast. Before I leave, I also want to see a water fund here. Over to you.
Over to you, Nick. I know we also have a number of beverage companies in there, but probably just to bounce off what Frederick has mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of the solution is much closer collaboration between the entities pushing for water security. There's a lot of disparate and sometimes chaotic initiatives. The good thing is that a lot of the solutions we need are already out there. So the Nature Conservancy's water funds, the Alliance for Water Stewardship Standard, the CDP Water Disclosure Questionnaire, the Water Resources 2030 group. It just needs us to join the dots between them and make sure that they work effectively as a system for change. And we're underway with that through Fair Water Footprints and working more closely with the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, and that's one reason I'm here this week, is to build those links with the OECD's work. Part of getting that right is that we need evidence. When governments and businesses and banks ask us what they should be doing, they need evidence of what works in order to invest in it. And we as a community need to get better at providing that evidence of what works. So how do we know that water funds are the way to go? Where's the public good outcome evidence for those? How do we know the voluntary water standards work? So let's go into this with an evidence-based perspective. And again, that's a key ask from the session. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Frederick. Now we move over to Leonard, Freshwater Director, Conservation International. Leonard, if I'm not mistaken, you guys have a grassroots approach. We've heard here from the corporate level, the PPPs, the companies, beverage and others. But how do you all tie this together to protect nature and probably plug into these kind of initiatives or have them plug into yours? Sorry.
Thank you so much. I'll be very quick. The bottom line is that water-related ecosystems and biodiversity contributes to our economy's well-being and also nature. But when we look at the kind of financial flow or the investment that goes towards sustaining them, this is very underwhelming. And therefore, there is need to up the game so that there is more financial flow to conserve these water-related ecosystems and biodiversity so that we continue getting the water supply we need, so that we continue to getting these ecosystem services that we get from water-related ecosystems and biodiversity. Now for me, there are four things that needs to be in place, more so related to this question of valuing water-related ecosystems and biodiversity. One of which we still need to do a lot of freshwater assessment, because that knowledge base will help or will inform our action. So we still don't know a lot about the extent, the status of these our water resources. Because if we know that, that knowledge base will also help us to value the ecosystem services and the goods that we get from that. So this is very critical in terms of their ecological imperatives, but also in terms of the hydrological imperatives that we derive from those freshwater ecosystems. The second thing that we need to do is to value. And valuing is ensuring that we even incorporate this into the national capital accounting. For instance, in Africa, we have the Gaborone Declaration. Those countries in Africa that have decided that they will have this natural asset, natural capital in their national capital accounting. Because it is through this then that the decision now will be made based on the contribution of these water-related ecosystems and biodiversity to our economies and to our well-being. And this valuing must also cater for the cost of degradation. What harm do we get if we degrade the water resources and the associated biodiversity? So the cost of degradation is very key so that it can trigger action to restore. The third undertaking we need to do is powerful economic base or powerful business case, as Fred has said. We need to develop a strong storyline in terms of the contribution of this to our economy. And that we need to capture the plurality of water-related ecosystems and biodiversity. It's not only water supply. There is also water quality if we restore a system that comes from that, in terms of managing pollution, in terms of managing waste. So we really need to capture all these plural ecosystem services and goods that we get from water so that we can have a powerful storyline to be able to trigger investment into this. Just for instance, if we restore wetlands, water sources, peatlands, it is not only water supply or water issues in related quality. There is also climate change mitigation. And you find that the market, the carbon market, the climate market is well developed. Financing is there. So we need to tap into that market by amplifying the plurality of ecosystem services and goods that we get from water. And a good case is that, for instance, CI is working on many landscapes in Africa, tapping on climate finance to finance water towers and watersheds. So we really need to capture that, either climate mitigation, but of course also the traditional. And then finally, the last one is the enabling environment. We see that if these are in the laws, are in the policies and the regulations, then those kind of innovative financing, whether blended finance, whether green bond, whether PES, payment for ecosystem services, then those then can have an enabling environment and which to thrive. Just recently, for instance, Kenya included debt for nature swap in their wildlife fund, trust fund, that they will tap also into debt for nature swap. So all these innovative financing mechanisms should be facilitated through the enabling environment for us to restore water and for us to ensure that the services we get from water-related ecosystems and biodiversity keeps on flowing. So please join us as other candidates, presenters have said. Thank you.
If you do not join by the end of this panel, we wouldn't have done our work properly. Leonard, maybe just to take you back on the development of a strong storyline. What is required on that front? Do you think this is still within the locus of our control, or do you feel that this is still a huge challenge, especially when we've heard that maybe some of northern partners may not necessarily be conducive to their business to develop that strong storyline?
Yes, we need to develop a very strong storyline so that it does not depend on the charity of the corporates. It does not depend on the generosity of the CEOs of beverage companies, because then the sustainability is secured through developing that strong economic case, strong business case, so that there is a market, and that then market that can fund conservation of water, conservation of water-related ecosystem and biodiversity. So the way to go here is that if we have that strong storyline, then we don't need to belabor so much or depend on the charity of the corporates to finance the conservation of water. Of course, we need corporate finance. We need those commitments for preparing the baseline, for preparing the context. But ultimately, a strong economic case will bring in those financing instruments or financing mechanisms to sustain our water resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leonard. I will come back to all the panelists on whether we have the basics in place, which are policy, institution, and regulation. But now I would like us to listen to the anthem from Uganda. Now, Uganda actually has what is known, probably I think the only country with Rwanda that has the Water Atlas, which is an extraordinary piece of work. I remember seeing it 13 years ago in book form and then recently online. So a country that actually went out of its way to map all its water resources. It's available online. You must take a look at it. It's really something. So, Anthelm, I know we, in our discussions, we talked about the experience of Uganda, and I think it's good that we have government over here, but also giving us some insights, or maybe what are some of the levers that are required to push some of these initiatives and develop a strong storyline.
Thanks, Serene, and good afternoon. Yes, I want to start by actually making an observation that every table here, there is around 2 liters of water. If you'll see all these bottles of water that are here, it's a huge amount of water we are taking now. And this is the same water that other people out there are using. So the observation is that no thriving population can exist without water. There's no economic transformation, no development in any country, locally or globally, that can do anything without the contribution of water and environment, goods and services. But where does this water come from? It comes from the ecosystem, the wetlands, the rivers, the lakes, and the catchments. But here is the case. We know, when I was flying in to Abidjan, I saw most of the rivers were brown in color. I don't know, is that ivory? The color, they are colored, the rivers. If you fly back, you will see. And that's already tickled my mind, the water quality. These water bodies are silted. The upland land is degraded. The wetlands have been converted into other economic activities, and we all know the purpose of wetlands. They are natural filters. Before water enters through a river, enters into a lake, it has to be filtered so that a company which is tapping this water for production, the costs go low. But now if you don't filter, the costs go high, and the cost of this bottle will be high. Nick talked about the issue of pricing law to these water users. And I agree with him. I will later share how in Uganda we are planning to do it. Policy-wise, it's really not good. It's clear that we need to protect the ecosystem. And we have a famous saying in Uganda that you cannot milk a cow without feeding it. Can you? Can you milk a cow without feeding it? In the morning, get 30 liters of milk, in the evening, 40 liters of milk, and it's not eating? The cow we have now are the catchments. The water catchments, the ecosystem, the lakes, the rivers, and the catchments. These are the cows we have. If we don't feed them, we shall not milk them. We shall not talk about any SDG, because all SDGs need water. We shall not achieve anything if the source of this water is not safe. So in Uganda, we have appreciated this. In 2016, we undertook a study to value what these guys are talking about. The economic contribution of water and related resources, the economy to the GDP of Uganda. And we realized that it is 90%. So the economic contribution is 90%. Now that does mean that when climate change comes in, who suffers? The people who are at the source of water are the ones suffering. So instead of solving problems from national level, we are sitting in the city and we are planning for the sources in these catchments. In Uganda, we have got 32 catchments, and we have decided to promote coordinated and integrated planning and development of water and related resources at the lowest level. We no longer plan at national level. We want the people who are actually in charge of this source to be the ones to plan. So we go in each catchment. Out of the 32, we now have 22 catchment management plans. And guess what? Who prepares these plans? It's the stakeholders within the catchment. We bring together all stakeholders within the catchment, including private sector, including politicians. They come together, they understand the issues that are affecting them, because everybody there needs water. They understand the issues and they sit and plan. They get a vision for their catchment. Where do you want to be in next 20 years? They make this vision and they prepare what actions, what work needs to be done to take us there. And those plans, we shall have bankable projects that are being funded by everyone, I would say, because development partners are coming in, the civil society organizations are coming in, private sector, we've had private sector, the beverage are talking about, Nile Breweries, Coca-Cola, you know, Kinyara Sugar. They are actually taking this up and they are preparing these plans and putting resources to fund. So we are saying that apart from that, we are also regulating the use of this water. I'm in charge of water use allocation in the ministry, and we have mapped all these water users. Of course, there's always the thief on the other side, but one day we shall catch the thief. I mean, the unregulated ones. So we map them, and they pay fees for using water. And that's the issue Nico was talking about, that are these fees commensurate to the value of the water? And later I will share in your next question how we are going to do it. So they pay fees. But also we've had these private operators as a condition in the current law that they must prepare and implement source protection plans. So whenever we give you a permit or license, you are required within 30 days, or not within 90 days, to prepare a plan, depending on the extent of your source, and implement it within 2 years, because we have to renew the license. So that's the point. So we are trying to tell them now, this has been a condition, but we want to take it further, that look at hydropower plant, which needs water to produce power. How much is an investment in hydropower? If you spend up to 3%, up to 3% means could be 1, could be 0.5, depending on the extent it's required, of that whole investment into source protection. You will not have issues to do with the climate change and intermittent supply of water and the likes. So that's what we are doing. But of course, We are challenged, I would say. First of all, as a ministry, we need around 400 million US dollars annually to invest in catchment water resources management. This is what we get, but we need 2 billion US dollars annually, but we get 400 million rather, to do that. So there's a gap there. But also, who are these people encroaching on these riverbanks, these wetlands, these forests? Most of them are the communities down there. These people are unable to have alternatives. They are poor. They don't have alternative source of income. So there's that resistance from these communities. And what we are doing, every project, and we have had some meetings with development partners in the country, every project that must pass to be funded, even in the parliament, must have a component of watershed management as the key. Even we have the president, I think last October on independence, in his speech, he made a directive that everybody who is in the wetlands must get out. Now, the point, that's a directive, but how do we actionize it? These people are poor. So every project has a component of alternative income generating activities for these communities. We are forming what we call water and environment cooperative societies, where the people who have been degrading these resources come together and derive environmentally friendly economic activities within the same wetland, not necessarily getting out. So we have got 15 already, and we are moving. I've discussed with a number of you guys, and it's a good venture that people don't have to necessarily get out. Yeah. Thank you. So we shall discuss later now.
Thank you very much, Anthelem. I just cut you short to ask you that we know that the issues in the water sector tends to be a misalignment of incentives, but I think you've given us a brilliant account of how Uganda is trying to align them. But what are the other incentives? Because we hear a lot in terms of regulation and almost sanctions, but in pro-transparency speech, what would be some of these incentives?
Yeah, one of the incentives is that even the local community themselves will suffer if these ecosystems are not preserved. First of all, you may end up taking dirty water and you will spend higher in the hospital trying to treat yourself. You may, if you're not so much enlightened, you may not get the linkage, but it's because you consumed dirty water. So if I tell you that if you leave this place, the river, the wetlands will do its part and you will have clean water to a level that you won't have to pay so much bills in the hospital, you are already incentivized. But the point here I'm raising is stakeholder engagement. Let people know the right things to be done. Most people don't know, and they are refusing to cooperate because they don't know. So one of the incentives is having knowledge. If you tell people the right truth, they will take it up. We've had issues of some politicians in the courts, of course, in the bit have votes. They end up trying to oppose the government, trying to mislead some people. But at the end of the day, they come on board. The truth is you need to be safe. So the incentive is they are not getting out because they have alternatives. They are getting out because someone whose land, which was not productive because of land degradation, is now going to be productive through soil and water conservation measures.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. I will open the floor for questions, but probably let's start with what came from the online chat. So I would ask each of you a minute in terms of answering this question, because we do have different perspectives. There is significant global evidence on the role of water on national and global development and security at large. What makes it difficult to leverage adequate financing from private sector and water-intensive sectors? So a bit of the challenges, I know we've touched a bit on that, but maybe Nick, to get you started.
Is this one working? Let's try this one. Power. Simple answer to that. Corporations are legally obliged to serve the needs of their shareholders, which don't always coincide with the needs of communities in the places where they operate. And so they are not a benign entity. And we see that in Kenya, right? So in February, Kenya tried to increase its bulk water fees and charges to a reasonable figure. So instead of paying $1 for an Olympic swimming pool, you pay $10. And that would allow the Kenyan government to claw back some of that revenue to reinvest in monitoring, infrastructure, and so forth. It would also send signals for prudent use to the private sector. But the private sector pushed back and said, we're not going to pay that because it's going to affect our profits. So we need strong governance and we need strong leadership working for the public good in the places where it counts. And the important thing is that, I'm going off in a minute, but it's a win-win. So countries in the global north need resilience in their supply chains. It's no good for us to base our food security on overexploitation of water resources because those food systems will collapse. So it's in everybody's interest to get this right through stronger governance.
It ultimately boils down to governance. Frederick.
Thank you very much. I think there are two things that I would like to bring here, maybe three, and use examples. I think part of it has been dealt with today is actually like, how do you articulate? How do you tell people the needs? Before we started doing water first, there was a lot of people saying we take care of our catchments. Companies said we take care of our water sources. It was neither coordinated, it was not being done at scale, it was just being done out of love for nature. You want to go plant 5 trees, you come back tired, and you drove a whole Mercedes Benz to go plant 3 trees. That wasn't cutting it. I think being able to articulate, do a business case, determine how much needs to be done is one way. I'll pick quickly the example with Senegal. The government of Senegal at the World Water Forum, the 9th World Water Forum, made a decision together with the government of France to invest $6 million in the sources of water for Dakar in a place called Pout. To really invest, that's what it takes. Then private sector can match that. When we do public-private partnership, for Nairobi we say it is public-private partnership, government thought we were joking. The private sector put $4 million, then we went to government. The government could not put less. So they put $4 million. We had $8 million, but we needed a business case to get there. Otherwise, people give you $50,000, $20,000, and they want a dance and a smile in return. That doesn't work. So I think that's the main one I wanted to say. I could give an example of Cape Town again. What do you do when your city is faced with day zero? When nobody will be entitled to any water, whether they elected a government or they didn't. Things have gotten out of hand. I think them coming together to say we're going to collectively get rid of invasive tree species that consume a lot of our water in the watershed and bring back indigenous vegetation is a big take. They've done it, they're doing it. They trained women to go up the hills, down in slopes, and cut those pine trees. It takes, and I think this is what the point I want to say is, but take it to scale, plan it well, tell people what it costs, be honest, and get them to know it takes on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frederick. Leonard, over to you.
Yes, there is evidence, but the key question is which storyline has been developed from this evidence? The messaging of this evidence to all stakeholders, to the government, to the private sector, to the people. So we might have evidence, but how have we packaged this evidence into strong storylines to all these stakeholders that are involved? For me, I think this is what is still missing. We have the evidence, but the evidence is sitting with us. We need to develop economic case, a business case, strong storylines to feed into private sector, the government sector, and wherever. And equally, as I said earlier, we need to mainstream this evidence and this value into the national capital accounting so that it can form development planning and result into what we want with regards to restoration of these water-related ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anthelin, let's keep it brief.
Yes,
Yes.
I think, thanks. I think, you know, when you come here and discuss from here, these bankers, these private sector guys who have the money, they don't have the time. And what we are saying is, go to them. Go to that bank, go to those private guys with the evidence, as he's saying. Don't call them in a meeting here and talk to them and you hope they have heard you and then you expect money. Go to them, align yourself with their development agenda, and that's what yesterday we were talking about, that align yourself with what does he have to benefit by working with you, giving you money, your government. So get the documents right, get the key information, deliver it to the right people at the right time, and then you'll be heard. Yeah.
Thank you. The floor is open. Which?
Nick, what you're saying is quite exciting. I just wondering whether, or at least how you thought it was going to work with the World Trade Organization, OECD, Global Commission. Are you thinking that we're going to see water brought into these international trade agreements in the way that Ngozi has suggested? And if so, will that be done in a sort of a blanket way, or will all exports from Africa or whatever global south countries need to have a sort of a water footprint attached to them which is specific to that, which would then drive water efficiency? Or would it be done on a general basis which might create maximum revenues to be spent on other water related conservation?
It's a good question. We're looking at that now, and there's huge opportunities. So we've got the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, which set out that you will do no harm. And so we're working with some of the national focal points to explore how that framework can be used to remedy and avoid the unfair water footprints that we're documenting. So over the process of the next 2 years, we'll be able to see how those frameworks, same with trade agreements. A lot of trade agreements, all the US's and the EU's and the UK's have a requirement to use environmental resources in a sustainable manner. So we're starting to explore, well, how does that play out? And what do you do if it's not happening? So we're through a sort of learning-based approach, we're trying to say, well, what needs to change in that global institutional architecture to get this right? Because we can't make it too expensive, right? Otherwise it's not going to happen. So we've got to see what existing mechanisms offer. And one observation is that there is still no multilateral environmental agreement on sustainable water use in the economy. So it's sometimes difficult for things like trade agreements to point to what's needed. Now, that's an opportunity for us to move forward with the UN, with the Global Commission, to put that global reference point in place, which will hopefully fall out of the Fair Water Footprints movement. How it interacts with things like water stewardship standards and financial due diligence. Obviously, we're working with the new EU directive on corporate disclosure and reporting, because that's a great example of how these things can be embedded in transnational governance.
Yes?
Thank you so much, representing the good people of Zambia. My question is as follows. I heard one of the presenters speak about encroachment in water sources and heavy rains having runoff waters which are silting most of the water sources. I'd want to find out from the panel how other countries are managing that. Because in Zambia, today if you talk about Lusaka, our capital city, today the capital city has got no river. All the water sources, the areas which used to collect water, our people have built. Our people literally will not allow any piece of land remain idle. Even those recharge zones, them will rush there and build. And then in trying to remove them, that really becomes political, in that it becomes difficult to remove them, the government of the day risks losing votes, while at the end of the day, this climate change also makes the water sources dwindle, including even the underground water, which keeps going down, and then making this resource scarce. How do we proceed? Or how are other countries handling that? And then again, I heard from
If
another...
we can allow them to answer the question.
I wanted to combine, so in the interest of time, so that I
Okay,
don't come
please,
back
just the last
again.
question, yes.
Yes, and then also in Africa, it is believed that water is a social good. Therefore, our people should have it for free. What of in other parts, for example, in Europe? How are our colleagues handling this water issue? Is it not a social good in Europe as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you.
Yes, thanks. Greetings to those guys in Zambia when you go back. Now, again, I like the point. You said it gets political when you start to remove people from these ecosystems or who have already encroached. And that's, I think, the case everywhere. It's always political. And when I was submitting, I said that at catchment level, the chairperson of the catchment management committee is a politician. That's number one. How are the politicians on board with your agenda? We have the chairperson of the catchment management committee is the LC5 person of the district, the head of the politicians at that local level. And that comes up. And that's why I said on Independence Day, the president himself clearly talked about it. Last month, there was a meeting with the World Bank, and they said they are not going to fund anything in Uganda that does not have an aspect of protection of these wetlands and other ecosystems. So it's an issue, the political is an issue, but the point here is, do you have them on your side from day one? In Uganda, of course, we have the National Environmental Management Authority that is doing this on our behalf, but it starts from those politicians. Are they on your side? If you try to bring them on your side, if the president is on your side, trust me, even that building you have had titles being cancelled, for example, but they belong to politicians. So there is a give and take at some extent once you bring the right people on board. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll be very brief because I love Zambia. And I will not deal with the political question because you've heard from Uganda, and I think they've had a very stable democracy where the president is able to make changes and still remain and get re-elected. So and if you allow me to digress, I'll start with the first question. I think the first question that also came from the floor. I think it's good to go the journey of valuing water. And it's good to go the journey of declaring how much it costs to produce the produce. I think it's a good step. It is true that governments are subsidizing coffee, they are subsidizing sugar, they are subsidizing corn. So it's also good to recognize that this is the value and this is the subsidy. And then the debate starts in terms of how do you get to real cost accounting and how do you make sure that the beneficiary pays. We particularly would like that because we're talking with our regulators. And many regulators are actually government. And many regulators work from a rights-based water access. And it's tough for utilities to really tell a regulator on their face that it will cost me 3 times the amount of money you are allowing me, the tariff, to take care of the source. And there will be no water if you don't allow me. So I think that debate we would like to have. So it's not just on the market, but also with the regulator to make sure that we can be realistic with our tariffs. But Lusaka actually gets half of his water from within the city, from the boreholes, and half of his water comes from the Kafue River. And the projection is that the water coming from the Kafue River will go up 9 times. So the reality is, how do we make sure that the mighty Kafue River coming down from Itashi coming down can actually serve the people or the growth of Lusaka as it goes on? One of the issues is that there is farming along the way. This is We have strong, good sugarcane farming, for example. And because of nutrients, Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company is now having to actually manage algae using chemicals in the water before they start treating water for other things. And these are real strategies. So I think the reality is, just like we're saying, it's good to go out with the stakeholders, it's good to apply the science we've been talking out here, and it's good to tell people the truth. I know there's a concession to a mining company to speculate some controversial minerals very close to the Kafue River. What would you do if they discovered uranium and other things, and all of a sudden you're having to deal with that as a real challenge? So I think it's good to be open, not to be afraid just about elections, but it's good to be open when we make such decisions as government. I'll pause it here, but we could talk more over lunch about Lusaka. But there shall be water for Lusaka.
Leonard, did you want to add something?
Yes, I just want to add that Zambia is one of the founding countries for the freshwater challenge. I think, again, revisiting my main idea of a strong narrative, there is cost to degradation. If we degrade our water ecosystem, then there is cost that related to that. And this cost will be felt by the public, will be felt by the corporates, will be felt by everybody. So we need to have a dialogue, a conversation around the cost of degradation, so that we help in restoring this catchment so that the water can keep flowing. And this is the whole call behind Freshwater Challenge, where we need to restore our wetlands and we need to restore our rivers. And as Africa, we are happy that Zambia is one of the pioneering countries that are part and parcel of this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Any more questions? Oui.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for this rich discussion. And I just had a question. Does it work? Yeah. A lot of talking about creating the economic cases, but when these economic cases exhaust your water systems, we heard Nick about the footprints. When I hear, isn't it a sign of the limitation of our present economic system, which is too small, too much focused on market? Is better. Where all the effects, the social and environmental effects are externalized. So shouldn't we rethink to have a much broader approach, not only focused on the market values, but also include the other values in the choices? So in a way, also forcing the companies who are operating in it, that they have to include much more the effects on the resources, but now we focus on water. But then you have to set the rules of the game different. I would like, do you have some suggestions for that?
Yeah, there's some big questions there. I think what's really revealing is that there is a systemic failure in the way that we govern, for example, our food supply chains. We were with the lead of sustainability at Nature's Pride a couple of weeks ago, the biggest importer of fresh fruit and veg into Europe, incidentally a Dutch company, and they said there is nowhere in our sourcing footprint where water is used sustainably. Nowhere. So there's some big questions there, and it comes down to this question of governance and accountability and public good. So further down the line with fair water footprints, we're going to get into questions about prioritization in terms of how water's used. Should a country like Zambia be using water to generate revenue for through global trade, or should it be using water to provide food security to its population? This is what government was invented for. If we look at our history books, the Hammurabi empire in Mesopotamia was invented to manage water. So they invented law, they invented policy, they invented taxes in order to manage water. So it's not it's within our ambit to do this, but it needs leadership, and it needs governance, it needs bold leadership, and it needs the public to be behind us. So exciting challenge ahead.
I think a perfect segue to how we would probably closing this excellent session. Yes, Hammurabi invented law, taxes, systems. Frederick, do you think our current systems, laws, policies, institutions, regulations are adequate, non-existent, room for improvement, and what is required to improve on the situation?
I wrote that question there, but I'll probably start by giving an example of a city called Eldoret, just a little bit on the western side of Lake Victoria, that came together, realized they were having a water shortage and said they'd do something. And they actually started by working with the regulator. That's why I celebrate regulators when they support us. And they said it's not going to be like this, and we're reviewing our tariff, and we need to do things different. And the regulator actually made a commitment. This is WASREB, who are not in the room, but they made a commitment that as long as it's justified, we'll give you support. For starters, the city of Eldoret is the city that manufactures the best marathoners in the world. I think one village in Eldoret has 30 Olympic gold medals in one village just from learning. Very good people. So and learning, the practice is actually done in forests and natural ecosystems and high altitude areas, so it's important. The city then went to the water company is owned by the county government, so it's again owned by a civic authority. They went and lobbied the civic authority, and then they went for public participation. And communities understood that they'll get better water security in now and in future if they accept that the tariff is increased to include money to take care of the watershed. Cut the long story short, the process was wrong, but they won. And the citizens accepted, which means the civic authority approved to increase water tariff fees for their people. So it is doable. I think we're afraid, but we need to tell ourselves the truth. And then, of course, they got an A with the regulator, they got that approved. The point I'm making is, sometimes we just want the law and the regulations themselves to be the ones that determine what needs to be done, but we have goodwill from our people. Just tell them, we are doing this for our grandchildren. We need to leave water to our children. We need to leave watersheds that work for our grandchildren. We cannot have chemicals coming down in water that take forever and a lot of money to treat them, or just mud. There's a lot of sediments coming down in the rivers, like we heard from next door. So I would say in Africa, we need to promote the examples that work. Governments will listen, and their fathers will listen. And then we'll do whatever we need in terms of regulations here and there, because they are varied from community to community. There are different ways in which we govern our waters, but also we need the regulator and NSAWAS on our side so that we can win this faster. Thank you.
Yvonne, if you didn't think you had enough on your plate. Yep. Anthelon?
Yes, I think Fred has said it all, but on the other side, you know, when you're regulating these industries and there is a fine, every wastewater, you're supposed by law to treat water to given standard before you discharge it. And shouldn't you do that, there is a fine to it. Now, it might, if the fine is very low, it might be lucrative to just discharge without treating. After all, I will pay the fine. So what we are doing right now, we are revising the national water policy. I think next month in cabinet, they will approve the final version, where we have put stringent fines. We make it hard for you to pay the fine. It is easier and cheaper for you to treat the water before you discharge it. Because we don't want preventive actions. We don't want to come and correct later. And then, who knows, we may never correct. So we want to make it hard for you to pay a fine and make it cheaper for you to treat this water. The other issue is, as I'd said, the other element is trying to put it in the law that if up to 3% of your investment should be put aside for this ecosystem protection. And as I finish, I would want to say that let's go with the saying that you cannot milk a cow without feeding it. So all of us should go with that. Let's go and feed our cows so that we keep getting milk for now and for the future. Thank you.
Leonard?
I think if we look at the full picture of value of water and biodiversity, then market alone with the distortions cannot help. And also if you overlay the issue of social cause, that water is a right, water has got those social element, then the market, the so-called business case alone will not help. But there are no straightforward answers to this. Is the challenge we have. There are no we can't say there are straightforward answers to this big question or the monster in the house. But what we need to do is to move towards a system that promotes equity and incorporate the business case, but also incorporate all the values. There's not only economic values, it's not only consumptive values, there are also non-consumptive values, there are monetary angle of appraising it, and there is also non-monetary angle of appraising it. So this is the challenge. We don't have straightforward answers, but we should push towards a system that geared towards equity and fairness. And all this, we should not gear towards only curative kind of investment, but also preventive kind of investment so that we can continue having healthy watershed. Thank you.
And Nick, to conclude, yesterday we heard about the massive losses that we are incurring through non-revenue water and poor governance, 25% technical losses, 75% almost commercial losses. As we embark on the journey of valuing our water, what in terms of accountability is required, but also in terms of ring fencing some of these revenues and resources.
I remain hopeful. A lot of the policies and frameworks that we need are actually there. I mean, one of the greatest achievements of the past 30 years, and a lot down to the Global Water Partnership, is to get reform towards integrated water resource management in most of the statute books of most nations on the planet. It's a great job. The problem is that those policy frameworks are yet to be implemented, and they're yet to be implemented, and pollution control and abstraction within limits of sustainability and equitable allocation are yet to be implemented for two reasons. A lack of finance, because we're not charging enough for our water, we're not putting enough tax, tariffs, or trouble. We're not putting enough money into the management of our water. Second area is a lack of accountability. Yeah, so this answerability of the institutions, of the duty bearers to the rights holders. And we've been working globally over the past 3 years to understand accountability science. What is it that makes duty bearers accountable? What is it that makes citizens raise their voices and make change happen? And how do you support accountability from an external perspective? And what we've found is really exciting. We've found through a global review of accountability interventions, 80% of those lead to better outcomes towards SDG 6. So it's a really positive and low-cost intervention for us to focus on if we're interested in progress for water justice. And the role of civil society in this can't be overemphasized. You know, the role of civil society to oversee and call out a lack of accountability is super important. I want to end with that call that we need to support those civil society actors to do their job, the media, of tracking our progress towards water justice, because without them we're not going to move forward.
All right. Thank you very much to our panelists. I think the messages are clear, but the one resounding one, which was join us, to all of you. Thank you very much for your attention, and please let's give our panelists a hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarin, and the panelists for this excellent session. We've learned a lot. It was fascinating. We have the 5th session starting in half an hour at 12. Please be back in the room a few minutes before. There's coffee, tea, and breakfast available just near the room. Thank you.